let's see. All right. This is all messed up now. I think that's working now. Okay. Alrighty, I guess we'll just have to go forward with the way this is. Alright, what is this? So basically, the IPCC released its new thing. Climate Change 2022. Dang, the full report is 3,600 pages. Okay, so each of this, so basically this report is chapterized. Terrestrial and freshwater ecosystems, ocean and coastal water, food, fiber, cities, health, well-being, poverty. Oh wow, then they have like a whole chapter on each continent. Africa, Asia, Australasia. Is it not called Australia anymore? Did they change this? I'm seeing Australasia around a lot more. That's a term. Australasia is a region which comprises Australia, New Zealand, and some neighboring islands. The term is used in a number of different contexts. So, okay, Australasia is like Australia plus New Zealand, and then like Papua New Guinea? No. What is this one? Melanesia? Oh, is this region. Micronesia, Polynesia. Ooh. My geography of this region is not good. I didn't actually realize that there was differences between these island regions, like Micronesia versus Polynesia. Like I've heard these terms before. I've actually never heard Melanesia. But I didn't realize what they were. Interesting. Central and South America, Europe, North America, small islands. Key risks across sectors. Interesting. Decision making, and then climate resilient development pathways. Wow. Very big paper. Let's see the full report. Working Group 2, final draft. Okay, let's take a look at this summary here. This is an interesting diagram. So is this saying climate change causes, impacts, risks? This is interesting. Okay, so let's start over here. Human society causes greenhouse gas emissions, which leads to climate change. Okay. Impacts ecosystems. So human society impacts ecosystems directly and then indirectly through climate change. Human society conserves and restores ecosystems. It also adapts, maladapts, and mitigates climate change. Climate change impacts human society. Ecosystems lead to what is my thoughts on nihilism? It's not good. It's not a great place to be in your mind, I think. Although I understand why people end up there. Because it's kind of hard to avoid nihilism sometimes, especially if you're somebody who's like relatively philosophically inclined and you think about things like a lot, maybe like too much. You can find yourself in a place where there are really no answers and you can get nihilistic about it. It's totally understandable. But I don't think it's a great place to sit and be in for too long. Or buy into too much. I would say try and avoid it, or like understand it, but maybe avoid it from an emotional perspective. Like I could imagine somebody getting nihilistic based off of like maybe some of the stuff in this report about climate change, for example. Like I think you can get nihilistic for a lot of different reasons. But yeah, I think it's if you're someone who's prone to overthinking or thinking a lot about something and wanting to get to the bottom of things, you can get nihilistic. Yeah, for sure. I've been there before. Or I mean, yeah, I think it's like there's a way where you go into it and then you can come out of nihilism a little bit by sort of recognizing that even if you don't know like if there's any true solid answers to certain things, you can kind of make up your own and just like be okay with that. All right, what is this one? Options to reduce climate risks. Climate resilient development, human health and well-being, equity, justice. Yeah, I don't know. I would kind of agree with that advice to an extent. Of like, don't overthink things. That there's a fine line between, because like you don't want to tell someone like don't think about things too deeply, because that's kind of like encouraging maybe a lack of education or a lack of understanding, and is pushing somebody to just sort of be okay not knowing about certain things. Like I think it's a tough one because I don't really advocate for like the ignorance is bliss kind of route. But I also know that you can kind of like spiral downwards if you get too deep into the nihilism. So I think there's like a middle ground there of maybe like thinking about things in a way that keeps you informed and like understanding as much as you can about the world and like the reality of the world, but also not spending too much emotional energy worrying about the unknowns or the unknowable things. People take comfort in nihilism. You think that's true? I almost would imagine that it might be the opposite. People oftentimes maybe are discomforted by a nihilism in the sense that they don't feel like there's any reason, purpose, or meaning to their existence. And that can lead people into like a little bit of like maybe a depressive kind of situation. Like for me, I don't know. Like nihilism has never been something that's like comforting per se. It's always been like a discomforting thing. But maybe it's different for different people. But yeah, I think it is possible for someone to get to a point where they are, what do you say, like kind of doing things that maybe are not so great for their own well-being or the well-being of others because they are nihilistic. Yeah, I think you can go down a bad road that way. For some reason, the Discord did not spam out the announcement that I started streaming. I don't know why it didn't do that. Oh no, it did. I see it there. Never mind. Popped up. Wait, February 3rd. What? Wait. Okay, what is this? I can't understand this graphic that they made. The risk propeller shows that risk emerges from the overlap of climate hazards with vulnerability and exposure. Oh, okay. So climate hazards, vulnerability, exposure. Julius Caesar. Okay. I don't know much about Julius Caesar. He's somebody that I don't really have a lot of background on. I'm trying to figure this graphic out. Climate resilient development, human wealth and well-being, human health and well-being, equity, justice, ecosystem health, planetary health. Yeah, this graph is really weird. I don't get it. So this is just a documentary? Is it like a long documentary? Sounds like a long documentary. $20? Okay. It's not terrible in terms of length. It's pretty good. What's up, Akash? How goes it? Long time no see. So essentially, this whole study, this work. So actually, this is only part 2 of the whole thing because this is from. There's 3. So as far as my understanding is, for this, the IPCC's 6th assessment report on climate impacts of climate change, they have 3 working groups, each responsible for a different part. So hold on, let's look at this background. Yeah, so the 6th assessment report consists of contribution from each of the 3 working groups and a synthesis report, which integrates the working group contributions and the special reports produced in the cycle. The meeting to the authors. Is this just an actual list? Okay. So these are all the people that contributed to this report. Look at that. 330 people from the polar regions. Look at that. All over the world. It's crazy. Yeah, so this is, I can't tell if this is complete or not, because this is only working group 2's stuff, and I can't quite figure out. Let's see, all downloads. Let's go back to the main. I gotta figure this out in the Mac. So, okay, so the IPCC is the United Nations body for assessing the science-related climate change. The IPCC prepares comprehensive assessment reports about the state of scientific, technical, and socioeconomic knowledge on climate change, its impacts and future risks, and options for reducing the rate at which climate change is taking place. It also produces special reports on topics. The IPCC is working on the 6th assessment report, which consists of 3 working group contributions. So the working group 1 contribution was finalized in 2021. The working group 2, which is the big report we just looked at, was just confirmed or finalized. So what is working group 1 then? What did they do? Oh, I see. Got it. Okay, I get it. So working group 1 was specifically working on like the actual like science of climate change, like how does it happen, the physical science behind it. So probably has a lot of stuff about like the greenhouse gas effect and how that works, how the gases trap heat, et cetera, et cetera. So it's a little bit more about like the physical science behind the actual phenomena. And then working group 2 did the impacts, adaptation, and vulnerability assessment. You've just been trying to figure out course selection since I used up all of the math courses available. Wait, you used up all of the math courses available? Are you sure? How many math courses are there? Wait, you went through all of these? Well, I'm guessing you had already done some algebra prior to coming into Monte Vista, so maybe you didn't, these ones you didn't do. Or you probably went like this one, and then you did what? This one. But you couldn't have used them all. Can you take more than one math course per year? Because you could take AP Stats and AP Calc. Okay, so got it. So this one, the working group 2 report is like the big one on the impacts of climate change. I wonder what working group 3 is going to be about. Working group 3. Where's the information here? You had self-studied sets. So you've already got stats under your belt from a self-study. Okay. Well, then it sounds to me like you just don't take a math class. Simple as that. Right. I am sleepy today. Oh, Erebus, I didn't see you there. Cheers. Okay, let's see. Where is this? Man, what is this called? This is called the Okay, there we go. This is what I needed. So working group 3 is about mitigation. That's what makes sense. Okay. I guess that makes sense to break it down into 3 groups. The physical science basis, the impacts, adaptation, vulnerability, and then mitigation. When did they release the 5th one? 2014. So this is like 8 years on. Oh, here it is. This is the one. Can I look at this one? There it is. Working group 1 full report. Not too bad, Erebus. It's not going too bad. I'm a little sleepy tonight, but it's okay. I've been spending a lot of time working on a video for just like a video related to like Bitcoin mining or just like cryptocurrency mining, and it's like energy use and impacts. And I've been spending like hours and hours just learning how to use Blender, like 3D modeling software, because I was making some like 3D models for the video because I just felt like it would add something. So it's been going really slow because I'm learning a whole new piece of software that's very complicated, but it's been good. I think I've got about maybe 10 minutes done so far. Maybe? No, almost like 9 minutes of the video. And I think it's probably gonna end up being like 15 minutes. So I'm getting close to the end, but I'm spending a lot of time on the visuals because I'm just narrating this video. Like I'm not actually gonna like I'm not in it at all. Like it's just my voice narrating over. So I feel like when you make a video that's just narration, like the visuals are relatively important. And I'm trying to make it as fast paced as possible, but also cover what it needs to cover. So we'll see how it goes. I don't know. It's been interesting to learn how to use Blender though, if you've ever used it. Let me see. I can give you like a sneak peek of it. Let's see. Actually, no, I can't. I don't have it a bit. I don't have. No, it's not. It's not really in a format I can give you a sneak peek on. You dislike that they disabled the dislike button. Yeah, I think that was a universally like people just did not like the fact that you can't dislike a video. I don't like the fact they got rid of it as well. I think it's kind of there's something informational about knowing the amount of dislikes. Now, of course, people can abuse the dislike button, and like you could get a group of people that hijack it and just spam dislikes on a video that's otherwise fine, and that's bad. But I think in those particular cases, you can just address that instance. But for most videos, like having a lot of dislikes is like there's value there for a viewer to understand that like there's a lot of people that disagree with this video or think that it's not maybe it's either because it's not tasteful or it's inaccurate or whatever. So now all you can see is the likes, right? So you have no idea what the ratio is anymore. You quite literally have no idea. You had to learn how to do animations to make a video about my research project in a 2-minute video. It ended up taking like 3 hours to make. Yeah. Blender is like right now, let me see if I have Blender. Like right now, what am I making in Blender? I'm trying to make, so I just started making a new thing for this video, and I'm trying to make a dam, like a hydroelectric dam. I think my lighting is off right now. So I just started building like this wall. These are supposed to be, I don't know why these are here. So like I'm building this wall and I kind of have, this texture is all messed up on the side I have to fix, but I'm going to try and have water like shooting out of these holes coming out here. It's going to be very basic, but I can tell already that I messed up on the texturing because of how stretched it is on the top, and how this is all stretched because I didn't. Because if I look at the wire mesh of it, or no, if we go to edit mode. Oh, I have to be in the layout mode. Like because there's not that many points here, so the texture's getting stretched across this whole face on this side. So it gets all weird. So I have to figure out how to fix that. Yeah, but you can make little like fun little things in Blender, which is kind of cool. I like that. I never really experimented with it. Let's see, what else did I make? I made a coal power plant. If it'll load for me. The textures take a while to load. The return YouTube dislike extension. But how does that work? Because then you're just, what are you getting? All you're getting is the dislikes that existed before they got rid of the button, because no one can like add dislikes. Yeah, so like making like little like power plant here, a coal power plant, just like because it's kind of cool. You can like animate it and like have a rotate around, and it just adds a little flair, even if it does take a while to do. This is supposed to emit steam, but it's not showing up right now. It's kind of messed up. It's like glitching out on me. But yeah, I don't know. It's a kind of a fun program. There's a lot to get into on it though. Okay, so this report is another. Wow, this is insane. So both of these reports. So if you wanted to read report 1 and report 2, you're reading almost 8,000 pages of just dense material here, absolute dense material. You can still add dislikes. It won't pop up It just won't pop up on public feed. Oh, is that true? Hold on. That's true. You can. I didn't realize that you can dislike. You can dislike videos still. It just doesn't show up publicly. Okay, got it. The extension extrapolates the number of dislikes based on the number of dislikes from the users of the extension. Okay, so it's like, so basically what you're getting at, you're like the extension is like, our users are a small sample size that we can assume is representative of the larger, viewer. And so we'll just like, scale that up. Which is probably not true, to be honest. I'm assuming the people that use that extension are not like perfectly representative of everybody else. They're probably a little more tech savvy. They probably care a little more about different things than the average sort of clickbait, maybe like casual viewer. So basically, okay, here this is one of the reasons why I feel like people are so misinformed about stuff, is because if you really want to like wrap your head around climate change, what you should really be doing is reading a report like this, right? Like a report like this that comes out is massive because it has hundreds of scientific authors, and what they're basically doing is they're looking through tens of thousands of research studies from experts across the field, and they're synthesizing and creating basically like a meta study / like meta report. And it takes years. Like it takes, my guess, since they produce these every 8 years, that it would take around 8 years to make these. But the problem is, who has time to read almost 4,000 pages of dense scientific literature? It would take you a year to get through this, it feels like. Okay, so like even like some of these graphs are nice to give you some ideas. So what this graph is basically saying, let's rotate this so we can actually read the axes here. Okay, rotate this back. Observed warming is driven by emissions from human activities, with greenhouse gas warming partly masked by aerosol cooling. So the observed warming from 2010 to 2019 relative to the 1850 to 1900 range was 1 degree, with error bars that give you like anywhere between, let's say, like 0.8, 0.9 and 1.2 degrees Celsius increase in temperature. The contributions to the warming was mostly coming from greenhouse gases. What is up, Matt? Good evening to you as well. So it looks like the big gas is carbon dioxide and then methane. So it's CO2 and methane, which we've kind of always known. They're not going away. Volatile organic compounds popping up over here. VOCs causing some warming. Interesting. This is actually kind of funny. Sulfur dioxide, which is a atmospheric pollutant that causes things like acid rain, actually has a cooling effect on the atmosphere. Interesting. But the error bars on this thing is huge, so maybe not. These are pretty big error bars too. The scale of recent changes across the climate system as a whole and the present state of many aspects of the climate system are unprecedented over many centuries to many thousands of years. In 2019, atmospheric CO2 concentrations were higher than at any time in the last 2 million years, high confidence, and concentrations of methane and nitrogen oxide were higher than any time in the last 800,000 years, very high confidence. So when they in parentheses, when they say like high confidence, very high confidence, this is referring to the number of scientific studies that they could find that reported this information, essentially. So like the more primary sources they could find in the literature, like peer-reviewed scientific studies that supported this statement, the higher your confidence can be that it's true. And I'm curious to see how they do that. They probably had that at the beginning somewhere, like what they mean when they say what their confidence means. I guess they don't really define it. They probably define it somewhere in here. Since AR5, improvements in observationally based estimates and information from paleoclimate archives provided a comprehensive view of each component of the climate system and its changes to date. New climate model simulations, analyses, and methods combining multiple lines of evidence lead to improved understanding of human influence on a wider range of climate variables, including weather and climate extremes. The time periods considered throughout this section depend upon the availability of observational products, paleoclimate archives, and peer-reviewed studies. So A1. So basically, this is just giving us the big broad strokes, these blue bullet points. It is unequivocal that human influence has warmed the atmosphere. Unequivocal meaning, I guess, like unarguable. Has warmed the atmosphere, ocean, and land. Widespread and rapid changes in the atmosphere, ocean, cryosphere, and biosphere. I've heard cryosphere. What is a cryosphere again? Oh, the frozen water of the earth. How did I not know that that the cryosphere was a thing? Cryosphere is an all-encompassing term for the portions of Earth's surface where water is in solid form, including sea ice, lake ice, river ice, snow cover, glaciers, ice caps, ice sheets, and frozen ground, permafrost. The cryosphere. From the Greek cryos, meaning cold. Huh. You learn something new every day. All right, cryosphere. Got it. Okay, so they say A1, this is their big overview, and then like there's some sub points that just sort of expand on this and maybe highlight some of the evidence that they found. Yeah. It is virtually certain that the global upper ocean, from 0 to 700 meters of the ocean, has warmed since the 70s, and it's extremely likely that human influence is the main driver. It is virtually certain that human-caused CO2 emissions are the main driver of current global acidification of the surface, open ocean. There is high confidence that oxygen levels have dropped in many upper regions since the mid-20th century, and medium confidence that human influence contributed to this drop. Interesting, medium confidence. I got to look at what they mean by their confidence levels here. Oh, I went too far down, I think. Oh wow, I'm in like the 300s. Global mean sea level change in 2300 relative to 1900. In 2300? So wait, are they predicting like over 200 years into the future with this? 2300? Wait, what? Sea level rise greater than 15 meters cannot be ruled out with high emissions. So basically they're saying that at current rates, our sea level will rise by potentially 2 to 7 meters by 2300, but potentially even like up to 15 if our emissions stay high or go up. There were plastic bags found at the bottom of the Mariana Trench. I don't know about that. I'm not surprised because literally you can find the problem is you can find plastic almost everywhere. Like there's plastic in humans. Like if you do like analysis of human blood, like you'll find microplastic in humans as well. Like we've made so much plastic and thrown it away in so many different places that it literally is like found at every square inch of the globe, it seems. This is the bag. This is the one they found. Imagine if like inside the bag somehow there was like a receipt and it just had the person's name on it, so we could like identify exactly who's the culprit. Like, boo. The Mariana Trench, located in the Western Pacific, is the deepest point in the world. It's an underwater valley known as Challenger Deep, reaches a known depth of almost 11,000 meters. The only connection between the trench and the outside world are the submersibles that conduct research missions and, unfortunately, man-made chemicals and plastics. The first indication of pollutants in the trench came in a 2016 study published in the Journal of Nature, Ecology and Evolution, that described how PCB, polychlorinated biphenyl, a highly toxic chemical that was banned internationally in 2001, was reported in crustaceans at a depth of 2,250 meters. In a recent trip to the trench by American explorer Victor Vescovo, 4 new species of amphipods were discovered. He also found a plastic bag and sweet wrappers nearly 7 miles down. Yikes. Let me see. What is an amphipod? Oh, one of these little shrimp-like guys. A study published earlier this year in the Journal of Royal Society Open Science looked at gut contents of amphipods from 6 deep trenches. They discovered over 72% of amphipods contained at least one microplastic particle. The first record of microplastics being ingested by hadal organisms. What is a hadal organism? Oh, a hadal zone, known as the hadopelagic zone, is the deepest region of the ocean. Oh, okay. Oh, that's the Hadal zone down there. We always talk about like the abyss as like the deep spot, but it's actually the Hadal zone. Yeah, it's crazy. So it looks like we have a lot of regions are going to be experiencing mean surface temperature increases in extreme heat, and a lot of regions are going to see a decrease in cold spells and frost. We're going to see some places get more precipitation, and then if some places, not as many, get less precipitation. More flooding, more heavy precipitation, fire weather, that's California right there. Less snow, glaciers, permafrosts, lake, river, and sea ice. We're just losing ice in general, which is kind of makes sense. Sea level increase, coastal flooding, coastal erosion, marine heat waves, ocean acidity, all going up. Let's see. C3, low likelihood outcomes such as ice sheet collapse, abrupt ocean circulation changes, some compound extreme events, and warming substantially larger than the assessed very likely range of future warming cannot be ruled out and are part of the risk assessment. Okay, it says low likelihood outcomes like ice sheet collapse. So ice sheet collapse, let's take a look at this. Does that just mean that the ice sheet falls off of the continent, right, into the water, into the ocean? I think that's what that means. Which of these is a good source here? Sciencenews.org, science.org. Yeah, the collapse of this ice shelf will result in a direct increase in sea level rise. Yeah, because it falls into the water. From the physical science perspective, limiting human-induced global warming to a specific level requires limiting cumulative CO2 emissions, reaching at least net zero CO2 emissions, along with the strong reductions in other greenhouse gases. Strong, rapid, and sustained reductions in methane would also limit the warming effect resulting from declining aerosol pollution and would improve air quality. Well, yeah, we could watch that. Let me give me 1 second. I just wanted to check. I haven't really had a good update on it. What like I like to kind of check at the end of each day if there's any like new developments in the Russia-Ukraine situation, just to kind of see. I mean, obviously there's new developments, but like just to see like what the status is. So I haven't checked that yet today. So let me see if I can find a quick little update for this. What's usually pretty good? I've been liking DW. DW News seems to be pretty good. What's up, J&J? How are you? Okay, ABC News sometimes is good. Let's see. 11 hours ago, Russia's last resort. Will China step in? I don't think so. Can you imagine? Can you imagine if China stepped in? Holy. In response. Jeez. That would be a little bit crazy. Let me get this in a way that makes sense here. Not bad. That's good. Not bad is when someone says they're not bad, that's a synonym for good, right? Like that means I'm good. Let's see. What up, T-Chill? I don't think. The problem is, I feel like China's got to be. I don't know. I can't really talk a lot. I'm not. My geopolitical knowledge is pretty limited, so. Okay. Also, I don't know what. I had to reinstall my computer. So I had to redo my computer, so I lost all my games and stuff. Which is kind of annoying. So I don't really have something that I can just sort of. I wanted to. So I don't even have a game that I was really in the middle of playing, because I've been so focused on this video. The way they responded so far. Wait, when you say the way when you refer to they, are you talking about Russia or are you talking about China? You're getting good results with your windmill project. Nice. I forgot about that. How's that coming along? That was a while ago, wasn't it? We talked about that. Okay, while I look for a game, we can just catch up on this.
In response to Russia's invasion of Ukraine, a number of Russian banks no longer have access to the SWIFT international payment system. Now, that could open an opportunity for China's alternative cross-border interbank payment system, or CIPS, as China is Russia's leading trade partner. Unveiled in 2015, CIPS helped establish the yuan as an international currency. CIPS' aim is to allow banks to process cross-border yuan transactions directly. Now, according to Chinese official data, CIPS has some 1,200 participants from more than 100 countries and regions. That includes Russian banks and Chinese subsidiaries of Deutsche Bank. Last year, CIPS processed transactions worth almost 13 trillion US dollars. Now, Chinese media says that was a 75% increase from the previous year. Currently, CIPS, though, still relies on SWIFT for international communication. Russia's financial ties with China could increase. Cut off from old trade partners, Moscow is forced to reorganize much of its economy and trade with a focus on Beijing.
You're using sensors to get the voltage?
It's been
Yeah,
a month
nice.
since the Winter Olympics opened in Beijing with fireworks and Chinese President Xi Jinping waving proudly from the stands. Abandoned by most international leaders, Xi had only one prominent visitor, Russia's Vladimir Putin, who certainly knew at the time that the relation between the two powerful nations would soon change. That's because Russia needs China after the West has distanced itself from Moscow. Russia might be optimistic. Last year, trade with China reached a record $147 billion. It's set to reach $250 billion soon. That's 40% more than current trade volume between Russia and the EU. Currently, Russia is China's second biggest oil supplier, providing over 15% of its imports. The country also covers 5% of China's demand for natural gas. Meanwhile, the food trade has been growing fast. In 2019, China allowed the import of soybeans from Russia. Last year, it added beef to the import list, and just last week, wheat. China is also a huge buyer of timber from Russia's Far East, with imports worth over $4 billion last year. As for trade in the other direction, China sells machinery, mobile phones, cars, and consumer products to Russia, with exports up 34% last year. China is also Russia's largest
The
foreign
CCP
investor,
supports
having
Putin.
issued
That was
at
just
least
worse situation for them.
$125 billion worth of loans for infrastructure projects that are largely
I don't
tied
know.
to
I mean,
China's
I imagine
Belt and
it'll be
Road
pretty
Initiative.
bad if China and Russia
As
team up. It doesn't
counts
sound
on
so
China
good for
as
like
its
NATO
new key
countries.
trade partner, Beijing might show some hesitance, though, wary of trouble with its Western partners should it run afoul of sanctions.
For more, let's cross over to Taipei and DW correspondent So Sang-han. So how is China viewing what seems to be quite remarkable Ukrainian resistance against the Russian invasion?
China still refused to call it a Russian invasion, but rather a conflict between Russia and Ukraine. It urges the Ukrainian side to assume the corresponding international responsibility and does not condemn Russia at all. But after the call between Chinese and Ukrainian foreign minister earlier, China signaled that it was ready to play the role of a peacemaker. Beijing said that Ukraine looks forward to China playing a role in realizing a ceasefire. At the same time, when Russia called China as its friend, the related Chinese Twitter Weibo by Russian state media Sputnik was deleted shortly afterwards. Many Chinese citizens said that we're not friends, don't pull China down like this, don't want to be friends with the aggressor, and others worry that such statements would be detrimental to the safety of Chinese people in Ukraine.
Now, on the economic front, China has vowed to strengthen ties with Russia. What does that look like now that Western sanctions against Moscow?
Wait, so Ticho, real quick, you're taking your results during 1 minute at 20 hertz, and then you make it an average, more than 1,000 results to make my average. So you're basically running your windmill just 1,000 times to kind of get an average. Is that right? Is that am I understanding that correctly? I don't know if you could call this I mean, technically, Matt, like you wouldn't say this is a genocide, right? Like a genocide is the extermination of like an entire group of people in an intentional way. What Russia's doing is not really genocide. What they're doing, like obviously like what Hitler did with the Jews is genocide because it was a specific targeting of a particular group of people with the intent of removing them from the population. I mean, sure, Russia is targeting Ukraine, but the intent of the targeting isn't necessarily to eliminate the Ukrainian people. He's doing it for, geopolitical reasons, or economic reasons, or, preemptive defensive reasons if he feels like NATO is encroaching on his border or on their border. So the sensors take about 1,000 results. Does that mean like 1,000 minutes of? Are you saying that's 1,000 minutes of runtime on your windmill? Like you're allowing the fan to turn the windmill? Looking at the actual footage you received from independent Russian/Ukrainian telegrams. Wait, that you receive? I don't get it. You're receiving like independent telegrams from one? You take 20 results in 1 second for 1 minute. Okay, I understand. Oh, the Telegram app. Sorry. I was like, wait, you're receiving like telegrams directly from the conflict zone? I was like, geez, what are you, like some crazy investigative journalist? Oh, nice. Oh, you 3D printed your windmills. Do you have any pics that you have on hand that you could share with me that I could take a look at? I'd like to see your windmill blade, turbine blade designs. Yeah, Matt, I don't know. I mean, we could definitely say, let me think. We could definitely say for sure that what's happening is an aggressive move on the behalf of, the Russian government and Russian military into a sovereign country, and we can call that like a I don't know what the technical. So if we look up like war crime, if we want to get like technical with some of our definitions here. So a war crime is a violation of the laws of war that give rise to individual criminal responsibility for actions by the combatants, right? Such as intentionally killing civilians or intentionally killing prisoners of war, torture, taking hostage, unnecessarily destroying civilian property, deception, sexual violence, pillaging, conscription of children into the military, committing genocide or ethnic cleansing, the granting of no quarter. So when we talk about war crimes, like there's a very like strict definition, I guess, what I would say, like according to like conventions that have established, like, so for example, the Geneva Conventions have established probably a very clear list of like what and what not is a war crime. Now, a war crime is a very broad term. So for example, like a genocide is a type of war crime. So the question is, would you say that this is a genocide? If we look at what genocide is, the intentional destruction of a people, usually defined as ethnic, national, racial, or religious group. In 1948, the United Nations Genocide Convention defined genocide as any of 5 acts committed with the intent to destroy, in whole or in part, a national, ethnic, racial, or religious group as such. These 5 acts were killing members of the group, causing them serious bodily harm or mental harm, imposing living conditions intended to destroy the group, preventing births, Interesting. And forcibly transferring children out of the group. Victims are targeted because of their real or perceived membership of a group, not randomly. So I guess what I would probably argue is that I would not say that this is a genocide, because I don't believe that the victims are targeted because of their real or perceived membership of a group. Right? It's an invasion of a country, and the intent behind it is not necessarily because of the people that are there, but it's because of the political nature of the country and its relationship to other countries, and more of kind of that stuff. Now, if Putin was going in there because he just thought like Ukrainian people were like immoral or needed to be destroyed, then yeah, you could argue that that would be the case. But I mean, the other question is like, well, what might you say is going on here? Is there a war crime being committed by the Russian government in this particular case? I don't know. I don't know enough about how all that works. But if you look at this list, going to war is not a war crime, right? Like, you can go to war. A war crime is when you do things in war that are bad. That have like that. Like, so for example, if you intentionally like kill civilians, that's a war crime. But if you accidentally kill civilians, not a war crime. Right? So if you bomb a city and you kill civilians, you could be like, oh, we didn't mean to kill them. It's very hard. That's a tough one to prove, like intentionality there. Yeah, Discord's good. Discord is a good place. I can take a peek. Yeah, but how do you prove intentionality? That's the problem with this particular thing. You have to prove that it was intentional and not just a side effect of carrying out your aggressive actions. Okay. Yeah. Wait, it says China vows to strengthen economic ties with Russia. Interesting.
Moscow are starting to bite.
Well, we have seen Chinese economic and financial support for Russia. Even though China does not directly support Russia's expansionism to any degree, Beijing strongly feels the necessity to maintain and boost strategic partnership with Moscow. China has been supplying electronics, machinery, and other manufactured goods to Russia in exchange for food and energy. On the first day of Russia's attack on Ukraine, China suddenly announced that it would allow the import of wheat throughout the territory of Russia, which was partly banned due to contamination problems. But we are not sure if China will further help Russia because it is in a difficult position and needs to strike a delicate balance with the Chinese.
Are these the ones you made down here? In the bottom here? I see this is your 3D design. So how did you, I'm curious, like how did you go about deciding the dimensions of your blades here and like their angle? Was there any like research you did into that, or is it just random?
Government more than willing to avoid any action that could easily expose China to further sanctions.
So, speaking of possible partnership, now that a number of Russian banks have been kicked off the international payment system SWIFT, are China and Russia going to link both of the national financial transaction systems each one has been putting up?
Despite the fact that Russia and China have strengthened the de-dollarization of local currency settlement in recent years, Russia and China still rely heavily on SWIFT for cross-border settlement payments. In 2017, Commercial Bank of China launched its renminbi clearing bank business in Moscow. A number of Russian banks have joined it, and Russian-Chinese gas, oil, and gold transactions can be settled in renminbi. But even if the settlement and payment information of China and Russia can be exchanged within the country by passing SWIFT, the cross-border exchange can only be done through SWIFT. Besides, in order to promote the internationalization of renminbi, it is difficult for China to act independently of SWIFT. It is a very complicated issue, and we don't see how it can ease Russia's pressure in the short term.
DW correspondent So Sang-han.
All right. Increments of 10 degrees, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80 degrees, 90. Got it. Nice. Yeah, so you're basically trying to figure out, so is that your variable that you're testing? Are you making all of your windmill blades or all of the turbines the same? And the only difference is the angle, so that you're like controlling for that particular variable? There's a 1.3 ohm resistor on the breadboard. Why do you have what's the point of the resistor? I'm not very good at it. Like, I don't really understand like too much about electrical stuff, so I don't know to get your voltage. And why do you need your voltage? Is that what you're looking at as far as the output? Or are you looking at watts? Don't you want wattage? Oh, yeah. Okay, got it. What's up, Cryptic? When UVB radiation levels are high, are the folate levels higher or lower? So the more UV radiation that you are exposed to, the more you decrease your folate levels. So yeah, basically it's the they would technically be lower probably if you have more UV exposure, but you can prevent them from going too low by having excess or extra increased pigmentation, right? So darker skin color will prevent the folate from being damaged. So that's why if you live in an environment that has, or rather if your ancestors evolved in an environment that had high levels of UV light, it's likely that there was a selection pressure for darker skin tone. You have some with less blades from 2 to 5. Okay, cool. Nice. I would like to see your results. Once you get some good data, I'm curious to see what you find as like the most efficient blade design. I'd be interested. So yeah, Matt, regarding the whole Putin situation, yes, I agree with you for the most part that Putin himself is and the Russian government under his lead is acting in a extremely aggressive manner, and it's something that should be condoned. And I think most of the world is condoning it. But it is a little interesting if you look back at like the build up to this, how you could argue that the way the last few decades have been going have sort of created a tension that you could have maybe expected it to lead to something like what Putin is doing right now. That's not to justify it, but it's kind of interesting to look at how after the breakup of the USSR, slowly but surely, the West and NATO started to incorporate more and more of those countries that were once part of the USSR into NATO. And it became that, and so essentially the NATO, this group of countries, including the US and a lot of Western European countries, are like slowly expanding closer and closer to Russia's border. And you might expect that from Russia's perspective, that's not so great. But at the same time, it's not validating what's happening right now at all. It's just, I think sometimes the context for why things happen or events that lead to things is kind of interesting. So based on your results now, 70 performs the best. Okay. Nice. How did you make this this T-chill? Where did this go? Or not where did this go? Sorry. Where did you render this? Is this something you made in Photoshop, or do you use Blender, like a 3D modeling software, or does your 3D printer come with its own? Does the 3D printer come with its own like 3D modeling software? I've never used a 3D printer, so I don't know. I've used Blender before. I recently learned how to use it, so. On shape. Okay, don't know that one. Yeah, Blender Blender is complicated, but it's pretty powerful for a free piece of software. I just started getting into it over the last couple months. I've been making some stuff for a video I'm trying to make, and yeah, I'm impressed with what it can do. It even has like really cool physics features in there for like gas and liquid flow. But it is very complicated with its whole like node systems and stuff. Rishi, I am wrong. Russia already shared borders with Eastern Europe, NATO countries. Yes, but not prior. So what my claim is that the amount of countries on its border that have joined NATO have increased since the breakup of the USSR, right? And Ukraine over the last like few years has become increasingly more wanting to also join NATO, and Russia is probably starting to feel not so great about that. Like if you look at like NATO expansion map, let's see, like maybe they'll show like over time. So like yeah, so basically if you look at where NATO, so in the 80s, so remember, so this is Russia, right? Russia's over here. Let's make this bigger. Okay. So this is Russia. If you look at in the 1980s, right? If you look at all the black, dark blue, and light blue countries that were in NATO in the 80s, they were far away from Russia, right, for the most part. But all of these green countries, they all started joining NATO in the 90s and 2000s. And then recently, Ukraine, which is right here, I believe, has become starting to get a little friendly. So you can imagine that if Ukraine joins, now really the only like Eastern European country that seems to be not in NATO would be Belarus. And of course, Belarus is very much friendly with Russia, so they probably won't ever join NATO. But you could see that like Russia's like, you know what, if Ukraine joins NATO, it's kind of, we're kind of getting squeezed here. But again, this is not justifying any particular action. It's just, it's providing like context for at the like the geopolitical kind of like global scale. For vestigial structures, do organisms lose its function after a single lifespan? Can you rephrase what you're asking there? I'm not 100% sure what you mean. For vestigial structures, do they lose its function after a single lifespan? So a vestigial structure, just to clarify, a vestigial structure is just a structure on an organism that has over time become basically has become neither advantageous or disadvantageous for the organism's survival and reproduction. So it's like a neutral trait that is no longer really providing any particular function for an organism, but at the same time, it's also not like causing any harm to the organism. It's not using any like a lot of energy to maintain. So it doesn't go away and it doesn't really do anything. It just sort of stays there, right? So a vestigial structure becomes vestigial over time. It's not like it all of a sudden goes from like there's like a trait, a structure, and then like boom, within one generation now it's vestigial. Usually what it is there's a trait that is slowly becoming less there's less and less selection to maintain it because it's a trait that doesn't provide any like survival and reproduction benefits because maybe the environment has started to change and that trait is no longer selected for. And so it'll probably like reduce its like energy requirements over time. Maybe that means get smaller and less complicated. But at a certain point, it might get small enough that it now no longer needs, that it's no longer using so much energy that it's being selected against anymore. And then it would become vestigial at that point once the selection pressure against it fades away, if that makes sense. Got a 69% on your bio exam. Nice. I mean, I guess, is that good? Is that like a high score so far? But yeah, Rishi, just to go back to what you were talking about, I totally agree. Like, I understand that a lot of Eastern European countries are in NATO, but my larger point was just that it's been a slow addition ever since the breakup of the USSR after the Cold War in the 80s, right? So the Cold War ended at the end of the 80s, and then ever since the USSR was sort of split up, because remember, a lot of these green countries used to be part of the USSR, right? They've been getting like absorbed into NATO over time. And yeah, so here's a good map. So this is showing us, so this big green country, this is the Ukraine, right? Or Ukraine. And on this map, it says that the green countries have had intensified dialogue about joining NATO, right? So what that means is like they're starting to ask more and more about joining. So if you're Russia, which is this part right here, and you've seen these countries start to join NATO, if Ukraine joins NATO, now all you really have is like Belarus standing between you and Europe and the other NATO countries. So I could imagine just from a perspective there, it seems problematic for Russia. And also, this is also, I think from my understanding, like NATO itself probably doesn't really, it might be worried about Ukraine joining NATO because they know that what the consequences might have on the way Russia perceives things. So Ukraine has sort of acted as this sort of sovereign buffer state between Russia and NATO, which you could argue are kind of like two poles that are kind of in opposition to each other. And like if Ukraine shifts too far into NATO to the west, it would trigger Russia. And it seems like that's true because what's happening right now is Russia is now kind of invading the Ukraine in an attempt to, well, I mean, we don't know 100% what Putin's motivations are, but the assumption is that what the reasoning behind it is that Russia wants to like kind of overthrow the current government of Ukraine that's sort of friendly towards NATO and in place like a puppet / more friendly government to Russia to maintain Ukraine as a buffer state between them. Now, of course, this is all just based off my understanding of what's going on. And I still fall on the side of that. I don't think, like, obviously this is like not the move to make. If you're Russia, you're killing innocent civilians and invading a sovereign country, and that sovereign country by its own accord would like to join NATO. And like, just because a country wants to join NATO doesn't mean that you have the right to like stop it from doing so, just because you're getting a little triggered at how it feels to be getting encroached on. So I think as anything is, it's a complicated issue. That doesn't have like a simple explanation for like you don't want to simplify things to just go like Russia bad, US good, right? Like those kinds of simplified things are not necessarily true. But also it's important to note that like just because you want to explain the nuances and the complexities of a situation like this, it doesn't mean, because sometimes I feel like people, like when you start to explain like, well, let me give you Russia's perspective, like you immediately get pushed back upon like, oh, are you simping for Russia? Like you just, Russia's just bad. Like as soon as you start to try to like talk about anything that's not just like Russia bad, people just assume that you're like, you're not like, you have like an opinion about Russia that's different. Putin's dream is to remake the USSR. Maybe that might be like his wildest dreams, but I don't think that's not realistic. I think most likely if Putin's he's probably a realist, and he's probably just pushing back against the friendliness of Ukraine towards NATO, and like probably all he wants is Ukraine to just stay firmly neutral as a buffer state between the West and Russia. And that is not what Ukraine has been looking like lately, as Zelensky, the president, and even the citizens are all kind of wanting to become more and more part of the West. Akash, yes, I believe that's correct. I think so Zelensky, who's the current president, is very much, I mean, Zelensky just signed the thing requesting to be part of the part of the EU. He wants to be in the European Union. He would love to join NATO, probably would, I would imagine. Because remember, if you're in NATO, the really cool thing about NATO is NATO has in their clause, like if you join NATO, the Article 5 of NATO says, if any country invades you, every other country will come to your aid militarily. So it's kind of like you get into a group where it says like we all have each other's back in like a really serious way. So if you mess with a NATO country, you bring the wrath of every other NATO country, which includes the United States, which is the world's largest military, like down on your head. So Russia would never invade a NATO country because they know what that means. So what they're trying to do is invade a country that looks like it wants to join NATO because they can do that now. Right? And that's also why the US isn't sending in troops, because Ukraine is not a NATO country, so they don't have that necessary clause or responsibility. But, they're aiding Ukraine in other ways, with weapons and sort of indirect ways. Yeah, exactly, sanctions. Putin also wants Finland and Sweden to stay neutral. from Russia's perspective, they want everybody to. They don't want anyone in NATO, right? Russia would see itself ideally as like a power, a world power. But unfortunately, they're not the same power that they used to be because of after the Cold War, they were shattered apart. The USSR broke apart. They lost a lot of their GDP because of that, and they've been kind of having some real economic issues of late. The other argument is that people might make is that Putin is maybe creating a war like this because sometimes war actually increases patriotism for a country and can actually increase the popularity of the leadership. Like, I think if you look at like Putin's approval rating right now in Russia, it's probably like close to like 60-70%. Because I looked at this a while ago. So as of February 2022, Putin had a 71% approval rating. And just compare that to Biden right now. Like if you... Yeah, like Biden's approval rating is 41%. You want to talk on voice chat? Yeah, we can if you want. If you just jump into the general voice channel, I can drag you into the stream room. Yeah, approval rating. Yeah, well, yeah. So you can argue that the approval rating doesn't really mean much, but it kind of does because it means that the citizenry is kind of on the side of the leadership. Now you could argue like how are these numbers collected, but it's just an interesting thing to know that like a 71% approval rating is pretty good. But if you look at his approval rating, it's always been pretty good. Like it's never even dipped all the way back to 2000, or actually in 99 it was bad. What's up?
1 second.
So yeah.
There we go. So what did you stop?
What's that?
So what did you stop exactly? Because your stream is obviously a few seconds behind.
No, I just finished talking about the approval rating thing.
Oh, okay.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so my point that I added on that, okay, but Russia has all those brainwashed people compared to us here, it's kind of significant because if you look at the way Putin dictates / promotes the media, it kind of certainly shows the way people approve certain ways.
Sure. There's a lot of propaganda.
Yeah. Obviously, I mean, I have routers in Russia, so I can verify that it's very severe.
And then, so the propaganda. I mean, there's propaganda on both sides, right? Like there's propaganda in the U.S., but the problem I think in Russia is that the propaganda is much more potent and like top down than in the U.S.
Yeah.
Like
yeah,
for
example,
don't they have state-controlled media in Russia? Like whereas in the U.S. it's like open press.
It's state controlled. I know like the channel first, the channel that I see. I don't know how many channels that are state controlled, but like there are so many sources that are controlled. There are only very few source medias in Russia that are independent, like Echo Moskva and I don't know what the other one was, but like pretty much I think 90% are state controlled, I think.
Well, they've I don't know much about Russian media either, but I do know that it's like even what's it, Russia Today or RT, is that state controlled?
Yeah, it's state controlled obviously, but it's always international and it guard or suspended in Europe. Well, not here though.
Yes, it says state controlled.
Yeah.
Russia Today is huge. It's a big outlet.
Yeah, it's huge, but they received so much heavy criticism because of their misinformation. Like you can legit tell from a point if you're Russian and you oppose Putin, you can legit tell the misinformation they're spreading. You can legit tell that.
Yeah, but I think it's interesting to sometimes watch. Like I was watching a little bit of Russia Today just to get a sense of what. Like it's kind of interesting to see like what would you be exposed to if you were like a Russian citizen,
I mean,
and you get a
it's
lot of
not very
the
pleasing.
narrative, right? Like
Yeah,
I was watching something and it was just showing a lot of footage of like regular civilians, like teachers and kids, and like how they feel like and these were people in the like the eastern part of Ukraine who are in the quote unquote like needing to be free and independent of the rest of Ukraine regions that Russia
those
feels like
those are
they.
probably those are like more probably pro-Russian Ukrainian, obviously, who which in fact in Ukraine are not a lot actually. I did some research like 3 days back to see like how many Ukrainians want to join Russia, and it was actually very, very low. It was actually surprising to see it's not that a lot actually. So I presume that it was only they targeted only those people who are pro-Russian, but not like very Ukrainian and so on.
For sure.
So you can sort of see what RT is doing.
Yeah, but it's just interesting because it's an emotional appeal as
Yeah,
well. It's like showing people, it's showing stories of individuals which often have like pull
that's
on the
true.
heartstrings and make people feel like, man, what if that was me? Like I definitely wouldn't want to be in that
Mm,
situation. So yeah, it's all
that's
propaganda,
true.
and yeah, it is. But it's also I think
Mm.
like the scope of like the whole like global politics between like the major powers is very complicated.
Yeah,
Even
that's
if you have
that's
like
pretty
Putin,
fair.
who's like a kind of a little bit of a, I don't know, you could argue a warmonger, at least right now.
He no, it's not the first time he's a warmonger. He's already committed war crimes against Georgia, against well, I mean it's not official war crimes, but he committed crimes against Georgia, against I don't know what right he committed crimes against in which year. And then obviously Ukraine in 2014, which was pretty much the technically the start of the Ukrainian war, and obviously grew now recently. And I think that's it actually. Those are the few times he committed war crimes.
Those it's all, but even like the Georgia one and the Crimea one and now this one, it's all kind of related to the same thing, right? It's all related
Yeah,
to
it's the same point.
the NATO thing,
It's
right?
kind of weird. It's kind of weird because like I visited Russia like a year after the Georgian War, and I don't remember anything at all about it. Like first of all, that I don't remember talking about it, don't remember anything about it. And then looking back at it, you kind of question what was the whole war about, and you make the research, and you kind of come to the point that the war didn't make any sense at all. Like Georgians, they don't even understand what they did wrong to get invaded.
Right. Neither does Ukraine. Ukraine doesn't think they did anything wrong either.
Yeah, but it was like it was the first sign that something would happen huge, and well, we ended up with this one. But compared to that, like the Georgian one, which was probably more unexpected, like this one was more expected because the amount of intelligence we've had this time around to collect so much information and exposing it out loud, it kind of was evident it was going to happen. It was just a certain amount of time that we had to deal with.
Yeah, I think I would imagine a lot of historians, especially people that understand the conflicts between NATO and
Yeah.
Russia since the Cold War, probably saw what's happening right now coming from a mile away,
Mm.
unfortunately.
I mean, you could say that it's basically still the USSR technically in Putin's mind because I saw some footage, like security footage in Ukraine of tanks driving by and some had the USSR flag, and it kind of confirms the theory that he wants to re-establish the USSR in his own vision because many don't know that he was a KGB agent and he still has those mentality, sort of not mentality, but like this motivation, the beliefs, the dreams, visions, and everything.
Oh
Like
yeah,
many people,
yeah. I
like
see what
many
you're
don't
saying.
know that.
It
Many
may
don't
be.
know that.
It's hard to know though, right? It's hard to know exactly what the motivations inside of Putin's head is. It's like you'll never really
Yeah,
know.
yeah, and that he's now like almost 70 years old. I think it kind of explains why he's doing that because he's A, running out of time. Two, he's mentally ill. He literally is. You can sort of tell by his speaking, his emotions. 3, he knows that if he doesn't do it in time, it's too late. So, and 2, he knows that he kind of needs to be smart with the situation in this case, which he kind of didn't do it in reality because he didn't expect Ukrainians being this patriotic and strong against
Yeah,
him.
that's true. I mean, I think it a little bit shows just how much Ukraine probably actually is sort of wanting to be more aligned with NATO and the West and kind of distance themselves from Russia, which maybe Putin
Um,
thought wasn't the case. Like,
on Chile's comment, only Putin knows what's what on his recent comment, what, geez. The thing is, like, many Russians kind of know how to interact mentally because many people like haven't seen Russians like in Russia how they mentally behave and stuff. And but lately, when Navalny revealed and exposed the life of Putin, like in general, like his mansion and stuff, people can like you can sort of see a pattern in his mentality, how he acts. So it's kind of interesting that many Russians who are rebellious against him, they kind of know how he behaves, and they kind of see what he's thinking in reality.
yeah. I mean, if you even in the U.S. we have that. Like, if like the Vietnam War was heavily protested by U.S., people were arrested for their protesting of wars that the U.S. gets into as well. People were against the Iraq or Afghanistan invasion.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot of global politics is just an absolute nightmare in terms of like, you know. I think I wonder a little bit like what if we expand, like, so what the ideal situation, I think what the US and like NATO and Western countries envision for like a utopia for the world would be if everyone joins NATO, then there won't be any war, right? And we can all just get along. Um,
That is an
but
interesting thought,
but the
actually.
problem is that
Obviously, there are people obviously probably gonna say oppose the idea to not everyone has the same sort of thought, which makes sense because I can tell like every person has their own thoughts, imaginations and stuff. But some, like Putin in this case, their imaginations are far too extreme, off the line, and outside the box. Like I
the
get what he wants, but he doesn't realize that the countries that used to be part of the USSR, they moved on. They tried to move on to be more independent, be more themselves and stuff. And the people like in those countries want that. They legit support that idea. But it's weird that Putin still lives in 1990s. Still lives in the day when the USSR collapsed and vanished forever. He still lives in that day.
Arian, this is
And obviously compared to like other countries, they just move on.
Matt.
And so you can sort of see like how Putin's thoughts are much different compared to what the thoughts of like Biden and stuff are with the NATO. Especially now with the conflict, they kind of try to grow NATO and stuff to become more big and more strong and stuff.
Yeah. Wait, T Chili, I think I don't I would imagine the US would accept Ukrainian refugees, but I think most refugees are going to like Poland because it's like right nearby. Like I don't think you can fly. I don't think too many refugees are flying to the US. It's a long flight. Most of them are just taking a train or a car to a nearby bordering country. And yes, the US
Is
is
just
sending
sending
equipment.
equipment? Yeah, they likely are. They likely are because I saw like photos and stuff like trains like and I don't know like what places in US they kind of had like big lineups and stuff. So I kind of feel like they are sending like equipment to Ukraine to uh, send some aid and support to the military of the Ukraine.
They've sent
Like they want,
what has US sent to Ukraine? I think they've sent like a lot of like anti-air and anti-tank.
yeah. I don't think anti-air might be that much useful because the Russian Air Force isn't that as good as people think. Based on what the Ghost of Kiev did to them, it kind of indicates that Russian Air Force is not very strong. Even if their Sukhoi 57 might be strong, it's not always based on the plane. It's based off the pilots.
We also looks like Biden sent 7,000 troops, not to Ukraine,
Oh,
but to eastern members of NATO. So basically, like just on the
So
yeah.
That means Poland, Greece, because Greece got affected actually by some of the attacks in Ukraine. Like some border towns got attacked, and they got furious, from what I heard. And actually, interesting. Speaking of borders, like yesterday when I was just scrolling through like the news and stuff, I come across this article and it's titled, "Putin's plans might be exposed," and I go, wait, what? And I go in and it shows a picture of Lukashenko, the dictator of Belarus, with a map, and it shows an arrow towards Moldova, and I thought, oh, okay, you kind of see where this is going, because it shows it's not going to be Ukraine that's going to be attacked only. It's going to be soon Moldova, I don't know, Estonia, Lithuania, Latvia, pretty much any Eastern European country you can think of.
Well, no, it's not going to be Estonia, because Estonia is a NATO country. So if Russia attacks a NATO country, they basically just
but I mean,
committed suicide.
And just saying like the countries that a Russian dictator would target at. But yeah, like looking at Moldova, it's going to be very interesting. But the thing is with Moldova is because they're not that strong, in my opinion. Like, I haven't heard much of their military strength and everything. So if they're going to attack Moldova, they're going to fall very likely. But that's going to trigger Romania because they're once again close to the border.
I don't know. I don't know anything about Moldova.
Yeah, same. I cannot tell much about them.
Where is?
But it's kind of weird because Lukashenko just exposed like 5 to 10 days of invasion plans in just 2 seconds to the worldwide intelligence. Nothing, just can use the photo, like sharpen it, analyze, and just see what the plans are. And that means Putin will sit in his bunker now, re-strategizing the whole thing again. That's going to be very hilarious. Because I don't know how long this dude has been sitting in his bunker crying, having breakdowns and stuff, seeing that his progress isn't going really forward and just becoming more and more aggressive and violent.
So it looks like Moldova has an individual partnership action plan with NATO. So they're not in NATO, but they have established the objectives and communication framework for cooperation and dialogue between them. So it's like I'm not sure what that means. So like if Russia like messed with Moldova, I don't think the U.S. or NATO in general would do anything. Yeah, I'm not 100% sure what this means.
On Chile 55's comment, Canadian troops. It's probably volunteer troops, I think, that might have gone, because I know some British volunteered to go there. I know a German soldier volunteered, and I heard even French volunteered. I don't know, like which, not French, Irish, my bad. Because I heard like some 10, 15 European soldiers volunteered to go into Ukraine to fight voluntarily. Because Ukraine opened up to any like international soldiers who want to fight, they can join.
Okay, so Akash, what was this video you sent me? This was about the rules for rulers. You said you're seeing this a lot because of the Ukrainian stuff.
Many people should watch Navalny's documentary about Putin. Like I've already talked about that documentary last year. No one really took notice, and then so people maybe should go and look at the documentary.
Let me watch this just real quick and see what this is about.
Sure.
Do you want to rule? Do you see the problems in your country and know how to fix them? If only you had the power to do so. Well, you've come to the right place. But before we begin this lesson in political power, ask yourself, why don't rulers see as clearly as you? Instead, acting in such selfish, self-destructive, short-sighted ways. Are they stupid, these most powerful people in the world, or is it something else? The throne looks omnipotent from afar, but it is not as it seems. Take the throne to act, and the throne acts upon you. Accept that or turn back now before we discuss the rules for rulers. No matter how bright the rays of any Sun King, no man rules alone. A king can't build roads alone, can't enforce laws alone, can't defend the nation or himself alone. The power of a king is not to act, but to get others to act on his behalf, using the treasure in his vaults. A king
Might get
needs an army
copyright
and someone
claimed
to
for this
run its
video on
treasure and
YouTube,
someone
maybe.
to collect it, law, and someone to enforce it. The individuals
Maybe
needed to
just
make
add
the
in
necessary things
the
happen are the
caption so that
king's
you don't own
keys
this
to
video
power.
that you
All of the changes
watch
you
right now.
wish to make are but thoughts in your head if the keys will not follow your commands. In a dictatorship where might makes right, the number of keys to power is small. Perhaps only a dozen generals, bureaucrats, and regional leaders. Sway them to your side and the power to rule is yours, but never forget, displease them and they will replace you. Now all countries lie on a spectrum from those where the ruler needs few key supporters to those where the ruler needs many. This foundation of power is why countries are different. Yet many keys or few, the rules are the same. First, get the key supporters on your side. With them, you have the power to act. You have everything. Without them, you have nothing. Now, in order to keep those keys to power, you must, second, control the treasure. You must make sure your treasure is raised and distributed to you for all your hard work and to the keys needed to keep your position. This is your true work as a ruler, figuring out how best to raise and distribute resources so as not to topple the house of cards upon which your throne sits. Now you, aspiring benevolent dictator, may want to help your citizens, but your control of the treasure is what attracts rivals.
Why
so
does
you
it
must
have
keep those
Bitcoin? I
keys
don't get it.
loyal. But there's only so much treasure
It's
in
like
your vault,
2016.
so much wealth your kingdom produces. So beware. Every bit of treasure spent on citizens is
it
treasure not
probably
spent on
wasn't
loyalty. Thus,
noticed
doing the
that
right
maybe it
thing,
wasn't that
spending the wealth
popular,
of the nation
so
on
you
the
see that
citizens of
way.
the nation hands a tool of power acquisition to your rivals. Treasure poured into roads and universities and hospitals is treasure a rival can promise to key supporters if only they switch sides. Benevolent dictators can spend their take on the citizens, but the keys must get their rewards, for even if you have gathered the most loyal, angelic supporters, they have the same problem as you, just one level down. Being a key to power is a position of power. They too must watch out for rivals from below or above. Thus, the treasure they get must also be spent to maintain their position. The loyal and dim may stay by your side no matter what, but smart key supporters will always watch the balance of power, ready
I don't
to
know.
change allegiance
Interesting.
if you look to be the loser in a shifting
Just checking
web
to
of
Telegram
alliances.
and
In
they-
countries where the keys are few,
and
the
there's
rewards
news
are
saying
great,
that
and when
in
violence
Siberia,
rules, the most
those
ruthless are
S4
attracted,
or
and angels that
C400
build good
troops,
works will lose to
those
devils that don't. So
anti-air defense troops are practicing right now. That's very interesting. So I guess because NATO might use a lot of aerial raids in case of worst case scenario, that means Russia is going to use the C or S-400 troops. That's interesting.
I don't know what Bitcoin's peak was. I think Bitcoin, like its first peak, like when it shot up, 2016. Is that about right? I mean, if we could just look at the. Wow, Bitcoin's. Oh, never mind. Sorry. If we look at Max. No, it looks like 2017 is when it really peaked. 2017, 2018, end of 2017.
Like 2017, like around September, like it started to peak, and it like had a peak, then it decreased up until 2019, and then it started to increase again by summer of 2019. Then it kind of stayed there, and then just spiked in 2021. So that's interesting.
Yeah. So in 2016, it was rising. It was going up, but it was still in the mid hundreds per coin. And then around at the end of 2016 into 2017 is when it really starts to inflate, going up into the thousands, into 2000s. Towards the middle of 2017, it starts to really hit its stride, and then I don't know what happens, but at the end of 2017, it just blows up, and it hits 20K. Think about all the people that had Bitcoin early on and sold their stuff in like December because they thought like this is it, and you go like 4 years ahead of time and it's up at like 60K. Anyway, I don't like to talk about Bitcoin too much. It's kind of just it's like a slot machine for techies. Okay, I think I'm gonna have to call it a night though. I don't think I can finish this video. How much left is there? Yeah, there's still too much left. 18 minutes. Good chat. Thanks, Matt, for the chat. I appreciate it.
No problem. Also, I forgot to tell you during tutorial that I'm not going to be in class tomorrow because I have to go to San Francisco again for a test.
Okay, sounds good.
Yeah, I literally forgot to inform you about that.
All good. Good luck on your test.
Okay. Thanks. I'll see you around next time.
Bye.
On your live stream.
Alrighty, everybody. I will see you later. Thanks for the video. Akash, I'll probably finish watching this on my own time because it's kind of interesting. Although I'm not sure. It's just about dictatorship. So, I mean, the connection to the Ukrainian-Russia thing is is the only connection there is the fact that Putin himself is authoritarian dictator to an extent. So, I guess that's the connection. Ticho, there's a person who threw away a hard drive in in 2012 or 2013, and he's spent the last, I think, 4 years trying to dig through the landfill to find it. So it's kind of crazy. All right. I will see y'all later. Have a good rest of your day. Bye.